Hello Stampers, my name is Linda Bedinger and I'm an independent Stampin' Up! Demonstrator in Denver, Colorado. I'm so glad you could join me today. Every year I do a white on white Christmas card, and that's what I have for you today. And it's actually 3 cards because I've done this in the Simple to Simply Stunning methodology that I have. A simpler card, one that's a bit stepped up, and one that is a little over the top. And so that's what I have for you today, and I'm tickled with the way they came out, so let's just get started. Well, here are my cards, and I have used a couple of different things. Mostly I used the Birds and More dies, but for this very first one I did use the Flowering Vine dies. I used this die, and that is where I came out with my oval medallion here. And this is a single layer card. And so this card, and let me show you the other dies. These are the Birds and More dies, and I used this border die. That is this die here. And then on this one, I also used this die for these branches, and then I cut them off and set them around on the card. And then on the inside, it has just a touch of red. I took this die down here, this circle, and just framed this saying, and this saying comes from Perfectly Plaid, and it says, may this special season be wrapped in love and joy. So that is the stamp set that I used actually for all 3 of the cards. It would be very easy to convert this one to only using one die set and cut this circle, and I'm going to tell you exactly what I did to cut the circle out in a couple of different ways. And so that is my first card, and single layer, just a couple of die cuts, and you're ready to go. So that is my first card. Now my second card is this one, and this one I used this die again, and this is meant to cut out this way. It is placed on the card, and it cuts away things and then leaves you with the front panel. So on this one I put a piece of vellum. I cut the piece of vellum 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 to cover the whole front of the card. Then I used this border die to get this detail here. Then cut this one out, and I cut the bird out. I wanted him facing this way, and used a couple of these branches around, and then used some of our blue rhinestones from the holiday rhinestone package. And on the inside here I have a bird and a branch and another piece of vellum that I also cut 4 by 5 1/4, and then glued it down here using this border die on the inside, and then just placing this card over it. Now this one I didn't go ahead and put in the sentiment, but this one I might do the sentiment in blue to match this, and that would probably be done either in let's see, probably this balmy blue would be the way I would do that sentiment on the inside of this card. And I did use a circle die on the back of the bird just to give him some definition and separation from the rest of the card. I put this up on a dimensional, and I put this up on a dimensional, and these vellum pieces are flat on the card. So that is my second card. Now my third card uses this same die, but I took my piece. These are all regular A2 card bases, so 8 1/2 by 5 1/2 scored and folded at 4 1/4. Then this one, I took a piece that is 4 inches. This is the one we're going to make today, so let me grab my pieces here. there's my base, 8.5 by 5.5, scored and folded at 4 1/4. Then I have two pieces that are cut 4 by 5 1/4, one for the inside and one for the outside. And then I have this large piece of white, and that's to do my die cutting for the bird, the circle, the leaves, and this circle. And so by the time you get done, you need to have several pieces, so you need a pretty good sized piece of scrap to do that. All right, so that is what I used, and to save time, as is my practice, I've already done my die cutting, and it looks like a lot of die cutting. It's not bad. These dies cut beautifully. So I cut out my bird, and I cut a couple of these branches, 2 of them. So you need to be able to cut that out of your white scrap. And then I cut these 2 pieces. Now, that is this die that cuts out the center. So how did I get the circle out of there? Well, it just so happens that the largest of our layering circle dies is just enough to go around the outside of this. And I actually got pretty good at cutting that out. And I'll tell you what I did. I cut the circle out first, so that I had a large circle. Let me grab one for you here. Okay, here is my circle. And what I did was, now you can cut this out of a piece of card and then center this larger circle around the edge. But I found that was not nearly as accurate as cutting the circle out first, because then I could put this on here, and I'm going to bring this up so you can see here, and then I could figure out what the border needed to be all the way around by looking at it from the back side here, what the border needed to be all the way around the circle in order to have it be on there just right. And once I got it so that I had a similar border all the way around it, then I took a piece of washi tape and, holding it just this way, turned it over and put down a piece of washi tape over the die and the paper. Then, making sure absolutely that I was still in exactly the same margin, I turned it over and I used another piece of washi tape on another part of the circle and held it down. That way, when I cut it out, I ended up, and this was one of the later ones I cut, and I think that's pretty close. This little part right down here is a little narrower than this, but it's pretty close. And actually, after I cut a couple of them, I found that this method, cutting the circle first and then setting this die where I could see the border, made this a lot easier to do. So just an aside for you, if you decide to try to do this, that's, I think, the easiest way to get a good cut and a good margin around that circle, because the margin is pretty narrow. Okay, so my piece that is 4 by 5 1/4, I took my border die and set it along this edge and taped it in place with a long piece of washi tape, ran it through, then turned it around and put it on this side to get that same die cut. And then I did it one more time to this one that is going to go on the inside of the card. The bird's pretty straightforward, and again, I cut a couple of these leaves to kind of push around on the card. So once we have all of that done, let's bring the card out here so you can see what this is. So this is raised on dimensionals. So I took this piece, and you want to make sure you're putting your dimensionals on the back side of this, and the back side of this is much more, you can feel the edges on it. It's not as smooth. It's real easy to tell which is the back and the front side. So I've got my dimensionals on here, and I'm just going to center this piece top to bottom, side to side on my card front. And there we go. We have that one set down. Next, I used one of these circles, and I'm just going to, in fact, I cut this one back a little bit further, and I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to cut these circles right away here where they stop being attached to the rest of the circle. And I'm going to go ahead and put this down. Now, I did do that technique that I was talking about, and you just cut up the center of the little mini dimensionals so that for every one you have two pieces. And so I took one of those pieces out, and there it is, a half of one of the mini dimensionals, and I turned this piece over, and I found a spot where one of those little mini dimensionals would fit. So what I'm going to do is spread those around on this piece, and I'll be back in a flash. I've cut away my pieces, and you see I cut a little sliver along the edge and cut out little squares to go on the back of these two little berries that kind of stick out, and I just felt like they needed to be secured. So we're going to next center this. Well, it's probably set just a tiny bit above center, and oops, I don't have all of the dimensional backs off of there. Okay, now we're ready to put this on the card. And so I'm going to set this down just a tiny bit above center. Center would be just as good. And going to tack that into place. And having those two little berries anchored keeps this kind of under control, if you will. Now, you could put more dimensionals on there if you chose to, but I thought that was enough to kind of keep it in check. So the next thing I wanted was my bird to be in the center, facing out this way, and I wanted him raised on some of these half dimensionals like I was doing before. And I'm going to nip off the edge of this particular leaf because I want my leaves going this way, but I also want my bird sitting on there. So this leaf is going to have to go. So I'm just going to trim that one off and then make sure that trim looks like the rest of the stem. So I'm just taking little tiny pieces off to make that look a little bit more natural. And same thing, I'm going to add a few of those mini dimensionals to the back of this leaf. I'm going to set this down right down here. Let's see, where do I want my bird? I want my bird like right in here, so his tail is going to come up into this thing here. So maybe it would be wise to set my bird first and make sure that his feet look like they might go on this branch. Then go ahead and put this branch into place underneath the bird's feet. And there we go. So now I've got my bird in place, and I've got my semicircle in place. Next, I have some more of this material, these branches, and I thought that, you know, a couple coming in from the corners and across here, and just wherever you think they look good. And I thought that getting them close to the corners or the edge of the card so the branches don't look like they're floating in air seemed to work pretty well. And on these, I used just a drop or two of Tombow on the back of these. To get put into place right up along like the edge there. And I'm going to hold those leaves down for a second. Let Tombow get a hold of it. And there we go. And there's something about this white on white that I just love. And so I think maybe another piece coming up here from the bottom would look good. And I'm going to connect that right down here and maybe have this piece coming in from right down here. So it looks like I need to take off a little bit of this tail. I think like that. And again, I'm going to add just little dots of Tombow on the back here so I can secure these leaves in place. And put that in place right down in here, coming off the corner there. And hold those down for just a second. And there we go. Now, after that, on this one, I put some up here, put some more in some other places here, and it really just depends on your eye, where else you think you'd like to see, you know, something coming in there. Now, that is the front of my card done, complete. And for the inside, what we have is this piece and another of these circles so that my message ends up being encircled in this pretty leaf pattern. All right, so what we're going to do is do our stamping. And I did this in real red just because it's the season. And I have my stamp here. And the only thing you have to watch on this is getting it far enough down that when I put this in place, then it makes sense that my stamp is there. And the stamp is a little bit long, so I did cut this part away and then just glued that down to the card. But right around in here looks like it would be absolutely perfect. Oh, I didn't get a cushion under that. Got away with it. Okay, so now we're going to just cut this like we did on the front one. Just cut it off here so that it looks natural or follows the pattern here. And then this can be put in place around my message, and you still have plenty of room to write your own message down here. And I'm going to do that same thing with some Tombow and get that put into place. Try and get that sentiment kind of in the middle of this circle of leaves and berries. And just let that sit for a second. And it really, the inside is quite simple because it's just these cutouts, and they do all of the work. Just take out a little bit of that glue residue if you get any out there. And that looks to me to be just about it. Okay, so this is now ready to go on my card. And so use my seal here along here, and I'm going to put a couple of dots of Tombow around on some of these pieces towards the outside where there's a little bit more space on the leaves and the berries, and then put this into place. And there we go. And just like that, the inside of that card is done. Isn't that just pretty? I got a little mark there. But there we go. Isn't that lovely? Just as pretty as it can be. Now, back towards the front. This little guy is poking up there. I think I'm going to put another one of these little pieces of dimensional underneath that to see if I can't get that guy to sit down a little bit. On this one, I decided to stick with the rhinestones. On these other ones, I used the blue from the holiday rhinestones, and I used red, and let's see what else is on our holiday rhinestone package that we might look to do. Let's see, I've got some of those. We've got reds and we've got greens. And we've got more of that blue, or just the plain rhinestones. And actually, I kind of like the ones with a little bit of color. I really like the way these pale blue ones are on there. So maybe we'll just go ahead and add the blue ones, since that way I've got one with the other rhinestones, and then one in the blue. And I'm putting a medium-sized one on his eye because the little one kind of just disappears into his eye. Now on here I could get away with it because there's a piece of vellum behind it that's it's gonna attach to, but on these others it's a little bit more challenging. So I'm going to dot a few of these rhinestones around on the card. So that is my project for the day. Thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel today. I do so appreciate it. This video is going to post on Tuesday, which makes it still November. So my prize draw for the month is a $60 shopping spree on me. One more day to take advantage of the join offer that runs through the month of November, and that is your starter kit is $75 instead of $99, so a good bargain. And there is the cards that we made today. Now you get yourself into my drawing by making an order of any size on my store, lbedinger.stampinup.net, and you can get to it through my blog, www.inkandingenuity.com. So that's it for me. I will be back with more cards, more projects, and more tips. Thanks again for all your love and support. It means the world to me. Bye.